Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. Today on the Ohio Roots podcast, we're joined by genealogical researcher, educator, and author Robert Cameron Weir of Dover, New Hampshire. Robert specializes in tackling some of genealogy's toughest problems, particularly in New England research from the 1620s to the present, with a strong focus on New Hampshire and Massachusetts. A member of the Association of Professional Genealogists and publications director for the New Hampshire Society of Genealogists, Robert is presenting multiple sessions at the 2026 Ohio Genealogical Society Conference, from probate and colonial research to DNA and artificial intelligence. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Robert Cameron Weir. Robert, thank you so much for joining me today for the OGS Ohio Roots podcast to kind of preview what you're going to be doing for the 2026 OGS conference this year. I really appreciate you taking some time today.
Oh, glad to be here.
Thanks. I start with all my guests. What got you interested in genealogy and family history in the first place?
Oh, I'd say it was probably sibling rivalry. So my ancestry on my father's side, my grandfather came from Scotland, and my younger brother was a Marine, and he was serving in the UK, and he made it to the ancestral town in Scotland, Carluke, where my grandfather came from, and came back with all sorts of wonderful documents and photographs, and I had to do one better than he did. So I became a professional genealogist.
So you like to tie into that Scots background then? Huh?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, it's a quarter of my ancestry.
Now, you're presenting on both very traditional subject matter, but then on also some kind of cutting edge subject matter for the conference. How do those two kind of sides or aspects of genealogy, how did that kind of connect with you?
It's so in my previous life, before I retired, I actually worked 27 years at IBM, okay, as software engineer and stuff. So I always had a kind of a big, deep background in technology. But up to now, that's the intersection with genealogy has mainly been helping societies with their websites and being kind of the techie person in various tasks. And all of a sudden, the AI came about, and I said, "Wow, I actually understand this stuff. I can dive into it a little bit deeper and try to relate it to genealogists and kind of show the best ways of using things." So that's how that part came in.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we get along. But these tools that are kind of constantly being developed are really pretty amazing. Now, you have a session on probates called "Where There's a Will, There's a Way," which is a nice catchy turn of phrase. Why are probate records, you think, so often overlooked by researchers?
Well, I think researchers, they start off following the green leaf, the shaky leaf in Ancestry or whatever they can get easily by typing a name into a search field and retrieving a document. Up until a couple of years ago, though, getting probate records usually required that you search through a docket book and find an entry and, navigate these handwritten, unindexed documents that you had to figure out what page it was on and track down records. I think that's why they were traditionally neglected from beginners. But recently with family searches, full text search, though, it's become a lot more accessible. It actually has become something where you can often type in the name and find the probate records.
If someone isn't familiar with probate records, what kind of family details or family history would they expect to find in those?
Well, there's two types of probate cases in general, when someone passes away. One, which you call the intestate estate, is when they don't leave a will, and there's an administrator appointed to administer the estate. Those tend to leave less useful records, but sometimes you can find like a distribution of the estate where each person who received a bit of it has to sign off a receipt saying they received their portion. And that can indicate, heirs to the estate that are often children or grandchildren. But I think the real golden one is when you can find a will, the full package, a will, an inventory of the estate, and then you can really kind of get a sense of the person's station in life, especially in early records. You go back to the 1600s and 1700s, you might otherwise just have a name and just a check mark on a
Hmm.
census someplace. But if you can get the inventory of the estate and find out kind of room by room what they had in their house, and find out, wow, they had a sword, maybe they were in the military, they had a book they could read. Yeah, in some cases, the inventory will list a pew in a specific church that
Hmm.
was treated as property and handed down. You know what religion, what church they attended, and also obviously in the will you're listing among the recipients, the relatives, often children, grandchildren,
Sure.
things like that. So it can really unlock things. And because it's a record that was preserved, um, property was involved. It's the type of record that's been preserved for hundreds of years. You can get insights on ancestors where you might have no other kind of biographical detail.
Yeah. How would you, if you're, because I know a lot of your research is in the colonial era as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. Are probate records from the colonial era more of a challenge, or less of a challenge than, say, a modern probate record you're looking at?
It's, I mean, the handwriting's different, the language is different. Those are kind of surface level.
Hmm.
But once you get over that, the process hasn't changed all that much
Right.
over the hundreds of years. Um, I mean, some things have changed, like the status of women and their ability to own property and things like that. Changed in the 19th century in most places. But understanding the process, if you understand the process and can get over the hurdle of reading the early handwriting, you can understand probate from the 1600s, to the
Hmm.
present day.
Okay. You were talking about that era. One of your other sessions is on New Hampshire to 1776. What about that period and that particular location is such a challenge for folks?
There's a lot of jurisdictional changes. New Hampshire and most people don't know this, for a portion of a period of time, it was actually part of Massachusetts. It was treated as same as Massachusetts. The records shifted around where they were kept when it was joined with Massachusetts, what we called Old Norfolk County. New Hampshire was joined into Norfolk County in Massachusetts, now an area that we would call Essex County, kind of the northeast of Massachusetts. A lot of the records, county level records for probate and for land records, are actually in Massachusetts, not in New Hampshire.
Mhm.
So it's things like that. There were a lot of boundary disputes. There was a big one between New Hampshire and New York, where they were both settling land in the east of what they consider New York, Albany County, and the west of what we consider New Hampshire. Territory later would become Vermont, and both sides were claiming it. And you kind of have to know these jurisdictional changes to kind of figure out where the records are. Records, as you know, are stored based on jurisdictional boundaries. You kind of need to know the background of that history.
Yeah. Well, given that, a lot of our ancestors may have arrived in New England and then passed through it. What are some strategies you would recommend to somebody who's trying to track an ancestor who may have passed through New England in that era?
Yeah, it's we have this thing called the Yankee Exodus of a lot of people left, especially northern New England, New Hampshire, especially Vermont. I think they said like half the population or whatever of Vermont emptied out in the 19th century. A lot of it as the West opened, the Northwest Territory, the Erie Canal, things like that brought them through. You really have to trace them every step of the way. I mean, census is a good start. I love seeing treating the census as a type of passport. In the old
Mhm.
days, every country you went to, you get your passport stamped, and you
Right.
knew kind of how you traveled along. A census record of someone in like Western New York or in Ohio or even further west, look at where the children were born. That's a very easy clue that sometimes would be overlooked. If you see a child is born in Vermont, where the parents were born in, say, New Hampshire or Massachusetts, and they're ending up settling in Ohio, they at least the mother stopped some bit in Vermont to have the child. So that's a big clue. Probate records can also help if someone left land to someone or left property to someone back in New York or back in Rhode Island or something. That's a clue, but it's tricky.
Yeah. My ancestors came from Canada through New England to Rhode Island. So it's always a challenge trying to track them around. So I can imagine it's just difficult going east to west. Um, One of your other programs is on DNA for the overwhelmed. First of all, what do you think causes that sense of overwhelmness?
Well, I think a lot of people. I mean, there was a rush of people getting DNA tests based on the TV commercials.
Right.
The kilt versus the lederhosen dilemma, and they get it and they log in and they're just given a huge amount of information. They're given tons of matches that they've matched to second cousin, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and they just don't know where to start. It's just overwhelming because you're kind of in a big field, and what direction do you start walking? So the point of this presentation was to make it easy, turn it into 5 simple steps that someone can follow to make good genealogical use of their test results when they first get it.
Do you think there's a common misconception about DNA that you'd like to clear up for people who are just getting started?
Common misconception. I think people sometimes put too much credence in the ethnicity estimates.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of not really understand how far back they're looking, that they're looking back often 500 years. I had a family friend who's, from the Azores, and he had his DNA tested, and he was upset that none of the ethnicity estimates mentioned the Azores. All mentioned that he came from the Iberian Peninsula. And I'm like,
Well,
yeah, it's looking back that far that your ancestors would have been from the Iberian
hmm,
Peninsula,
right.
probably from Portugal. So I think that's a common misconception.
Hi, everyone. Noel Poirier here, Executive Director of the Ohio Genealogical Society and your host for the Ohio Roots podcast. Did you know you can help preserve the past and empower the future? Your donation to the Ohio Genealogical Society helps protect vital family history records and supports research for generations to come. Visit www.ogs.org/donate and give today. Thank you so much for your support. Get ready for the 2025 OGS Annual Conference coming to Sharonville, Ohio, April 29th through May 2nd, 2026. Join genealogists and family historians from across the country for 4 days of inspiring sessions, expert speakers, research tools, and community connections. Don't miss your chance to discover new stories and strengthen your family history skills. Registration opens November 28th, so be sure to register and be part of Ohio's premier genealogy event. I usually like to talk about kind of people who are just getting started because most of us who do genealogy a lot understand a lot of these things, but some of the people who are just getting started don't. How do you balance DNA evidence with the traditional documentary research that people do? Because I think sometimes people do the DNA and they think they're done.
So I think there's 2 types of people doing research: those who have a known family mystery that they're trying to resolve with DNA. The classic
Hmm.
example would be someone who's been adopted and is trying to find their birth family. That's a whole separate thing. I think that's less a balance than how do you use the DNA to solve the problem. I think for people who don't have that type of mystery that they're starting out looking to solve, I like using DNA more as what I've seen referred to as cousin bait.
Okay.
And the idea is some people inherited photographs from their mother or their grandmother, their great grandmother, and got the family Bible and got the family journal and the family photographs. And other people like me got bupkis. We have nothing. It all went to some other second cousin, third cousin. And I didn't get the treasure trove of family documents and manuscripts and stuff. Someone else did. How do I find them? Doing the DNA test allows me to build out that kind of the near field of my family, and kind of the extended branches of living second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins, some of whom have that material, have the family journal, have the Bible and things like that. Uh, I think most genealogists, when they start off, they're looking to trace back. They're chasing after that Mayflower, or the
Right.
American Revolutionary War soldier, or the immigrant back in the old country. But there's a lot of value in getting those, the booty of the people
Right.
who are your third cousins, who actually have, the funeral card for your great great grandmother or something
Hmm.
like that.
We'll pivot to your previous life as a software person. One of your programs you're giving is on using Notebook LM for genealogists. Can you describe for folks who aren't familiar with it what it is?
So Notebook LM is a program from Google. It's based on their Gemini large language model slash chatbot. So it's kind of analogous to ChatGPT if people are more familiar with that. Notebook LM is based on it, originally created for the education market for university students to kind of better work with their research notes and their papers and things that they're doing
Hmm.
to kind of put together a research project. It's very useful for genealogy because it allows you to take up to 300 sources, PDF documents up to book length, combine them into a notebook, and then do searches and questions and prompts and summarizations and data extractions across all 300 documents at once. So a classic example would be, taking in New England, we have annual reports for our municipalities, some going back to the Civil War. You can take a 300, well, not 300-year run, but up to 300 of these documents, put them in a notebook in Notebook LM, and ask questions about it, like extract the vital records or
Right.
give me the history of the public library. I can think of a complete run of a genealogical journal,
Okay.
or all the books I can find on the history of colonial New Hampshire. And you can kind of do these things that you could never do with ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is limited. You can only upload, a journal article or so in length to work
Right.
with. Notebook LM is kind of a real power tool for plowing through a lot of sources at once.
Do you have an example where you've used it really successfully to pull some information you needed?
Yeah, an interesting thing I've done, and one of the examples I give in the presentation is I took an ancestor of mine, Edward Blanchard Chessman, was a Civil War soldier from Massachusetts. I took his widow's pension file, his carded medical files, so manuscript form for a lot of these things, along with a regimental history of the 32nd Massachusetts Infantry that he served in. He's not, by the way, he's not mentioned in that book at all, but it gives kind of the overall context of what the regiment was doing, along with a government publication that gives all the pension laws that were still active as of 1909, I think it was, so included the Civil War pensions. And I put these documents all into a notebook and asked Notebook LM to essentially write Chessman's service story, write the narrative of his service, blending in what his unit was doing at the time. So kind of something that we would naturally do. I think we'd read the regimental history and say, well,
Right.
here's where the unit was at this time. Well, he's on this muster list, so he must have been here. He was in the hospital here, and you can kind of blend it all together. It's kind of a mashup of different documents, some providing context, some providing the original records.
You're doing a couple discussions, Notebook LM, AI for genealogical societies, ChatGPT for genealogists. In your session on AI and Genealogical Society, do you discuss how you see organizations adapting these tools? And what's the best way to do that, you think?
Yeah, so it's kind of based on my own experience. So I'm vice president of the New Hampshire Society of Genealogists, and we use, and I've been using AI with them on a variety of tasks. So the presentation is partially things genealogical societies can be doing today using AI. What are the best tools for it, and what are some things they can do? But I think it depends on what your society actually does. So some societies do research, they review lineage applications, they issue certificates, they maintain record databases and things like that. There's a whole set of things that AI can help with, that kind of thing. And then other societies are doing things like, I want to determine what type of directors and officers insurance we need to get. I want to review our bylaws for inconsistency. I want to create a Facebook post to advertise our conference. Those type of things. And AI, across the whole range of things, can help. And I think genealogical societies just might need a little bit of or benefit from a little bit of guidance on what are the things you can do best. But not everything works well. I think there's things where AI will hurt you, and that comes around dealing with authenticity. For example, if you're sending a condolence letter to the widow or whatever of a member who's passed away, you don't want AI to generate that. If you're issuing a volunteer of the award commendation, for one of your society volunteers, you don't want AI to generate that. You have to kind of realize what are the transactional things your society does versus where it needs to be authentically human. It's like the old days. We used to have those Emily Post type things. Oh, here are the letters that you must handwrite versus which ones you can type. And now I think it's like, well, what can we do AI with, and what must we never use AI with?
So, if we, when I look at the Ohio Genealogical Society and I look at our demographic, they may not be as comfortable or with AI as a younger generation or someone who's already kind of computer savvy is. What do you think their biggest misunderstanding is about AI?
Yeah, I think what I notice is people trusting it too much,
Mm,
not realizing kind of it's a tool you need to work with, you need to push back, you need to follow up. It's just kind of this oracle that you ask the question and it comes back with the answer, and you shut your computer off and you're done with the day. It's really
yeah.
something you have to work with. It's going to improve over time, but it can be dangerous. It's kind of
Hmm.
like, remember when GPS first came out in automobiles, and there were those reports in the news of people driving right in the pond because the GPS was
Yeah.
inaccurate on one of the turns, and they were just following it blindly
Yeah.
and got wet. And I think
Yeah.
you can't follow AI blindly.
Yeah. Do you see kind of all these emerging technologies helping genealogists collaborate more?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, how do we collaborate now with societies? We do it face to face. We have Zoom meetings. We have online forums and stuff like that. I think where it could really be interesting is if collaborative environments, say WikiTree, that a lot of us already use for posting our
Mm,
family trees, or family trees on Family Search. If those organizations start integrating AI within it, and they could kind of maybe connect trees or
mhm.
introduce people as being
Right.
cousins and stuff like that. So there's probably some way that AI can mediate introductions and kind of aligning missing links that haven't been noticed before. So it's potential, but right now it's kind of AI is the silo, AI is an
Right.
application, AI is the separate thing you go to. Look how it started. That's how Dropbox started,
Hmm.
for file sharing. But today, almost every app that you have on your phone that can open or save a document has an option to get stuff from Dropbox. So eventually, I think we get AI in the tools we use. We get it in Ancestry, we get it in Family Search, we get it in, Family Tree Maker and stuff like that, rather than have
Hmm.
AI be a separate tool that we
Right.
go to.
Last question, as I ask all my guests this, you run into someone who's just starting out on their genealogical journey. What's the best piece of advice you're going to give them?
Oh, I'd say talk to your oldest living relatives and get their story, because you don't get a second shot at that.
Yeah.
And
I've studied.
if you're starting off and you're the oldest living relative, then you need to start writing down what you know. That's kind of your obligation. But
Well, Robert Cameron Weir, thank you so much for joining me today for the OGS Ohio Roots podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time and giving us a little preview of your programs that you're offering for the 2026 OGS conference this year. So thank you.
okay, great. Looking forward to it.
Great. We'll see you there. Well, our thanks to Robert Cameron Weir for joining us today and sharing his expertise on everything from probate records and colonial New England research to DNA and emerging tools like AI and ChatGPT. Robert will be presenting several sessions at the 2026 Ohio Genealogical Society Conference, so be sure to check the program and catch his talks if you're attending. Whether you're wrestling with early New England ancestors or exploring new research technologies, Robert's insights offer something for every genealogist. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.